Hear the shouts, hear the triumph songs in the camp of the saved. The hand of God has turned the tide. The hand of God is raised in victory. The hand of God has turned the tide. Our church is placed in the Chichester Harbour area. Many of us each week swim, cycle or run around the harbour. Sometimes the tide is up and everything seems, well, just kind of perfect. But quite often the tide is out. And when the tide is out, all you can see and all you can smell is mud. There are boats everywhere stuck in the mud. Luxury boats, rowing boats, sailing boats, broken boats. They're all just sitting there static, leaning to one side, intoxicated with insignificance and self-pity, stuck in the mud. But no matter how gloomy things seem, there's always this deep underlying confidence that the tide will turn again. Something way out of our control happens each day. The tides rise again.
High and low tides are caused by the moon. The moon's gravitational pull generates something called the tidal force. The tidal force causes the Earth and its waters to bulge out on the side closest to the moon and the side furthest from the moon. These bulges of water are high tides. As the Earth's surface rotates at 1,000 miles an hour, your region of Earth passes through both of these bulges each day. And when you're in one of these bulges, you experience a high tide, and when you're not in one of these bulges, you experience a low tide. The key to all swimmers, rowers, fishermen and sailors is to know the direction of the tide. One thing we all learnt during the last 4 years is we don't control much. We used to go to conferences where we would listen to pastors or futurists or visionaries waxing eloquently. But what we recently discovered together is that there's some things we just can't foresee. And to be reminded of that in a period where everyone is obsessed with aggressive, controlled individualism, the mastery of their own fate and choices, maybe could be a good thing. We don't control the gravitational pull of the Earth. We can't control how fast the Earth's surface is moving at 1,000 miles an hour, orbiting around the sun at over 67,000 miles per hour. We don't control the tides either. But we do have the promise of Jesus that He will build the church and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Pestilence, pandemics, politics, persecution will not stop that rising tide. When I try and control what I can't control, it leads to anxiety and stagnation, even rebellion and stubbornness. But what I can control is my response, my attitudes to the shifting tides. I can choose to be faithful and fruitful in the moment. I can live a life poised, ready to seize the day with all kinds of great expectation. The Bible's grand narrative says there is a tidal force coming and the gravitational pull of all of history is pushing towards the return of Christ. The psalmist reminds us whose hand is turning tides. The hand of God has turned the tide. There is this moment when the disciples have been traveling with Jesus and they need some well-earned rest and food. But Jesus says, my food is to do the will of Him who sent me and to finish His work. Don't you have a saying, he says, it's still 4 months until the harvest. I tell you, open your eyes and look to the fields. They are ripe for harvest. One thing I've learned is we have to be intentional about keeping our eyes wide open because they naturally drift towards introspection, ease and comfort. You've heard it said, the tide and time wait for no man. You have to be ready in season and out of season. Have you noticed that Jesus is committed to saving people on our days off, on days when we're not up to it, and on days when we have high expectation? Jesus saves, and our mission, wherever the tide is drawing us, is to lead people to Jesus, but also to build a place of restoration that those families could call home.
Hi, I'm Billy. When I was 16 at college, I met Chris Norton and he introduced me to Jesus. After a little while, I started coming to church. And then a few years later, when I finished university, Ben Knight spoke to me about joining the Bible college here. It was whilst I was at the Bible college that I really started to pray for my mum to know Jesus. And after probably about 6 months, she started to come to church and very quickly found the same relationship with Jesus as I had. A few years later, I met my wife, Abigail, and we got married, and now we have 2 wonderful, beautiful children, Isaiah and Daria. A few months ago, my cousin Kathy started coming to church after her daughter Amelia, who's 4, asked if she could come to church. It didn't take very long for Kathy to encounter Jesus and for her life to be completely transformed. And that led to her mum Wendy coming shortly after, and both of them got baptised just a few months ago, which was just amazing. It's really amazing to see how God is working generationally in my family. He's clearly interested in saving and establishing future generations through me as a first-gen Christian and through my children and their children to come, but he's also working cross-generationally backwards through my mum and through my cousins who are older than me as well. It's really exciting to see how God has this plan for my family, and it's definitely not finished. There's other children within my family who are asking if we can bring them to church, which is just wonderful. It's amazing to see that the plan that he has for my family isn't finished. It's only just beginning.
Shifts happen in our personal lives, in our family lives, and in our nation. The heart of Above and Beyond is about forging ahead into the future so that when those shifts happen, we are ready to respond with spirit-led planning and intelligent response. Legacy every year means for us leaving the church at a better place than we found it, both in what we sow, but also what we pull out of the ground and build. All we have to do is open our eyes, sometimes thankfully remembering what God has already done, and this propels us into our future. Over the last few years, the tide has brought in some incredible challenges, yet at the same time, we've been able to turn those heartaches into opportunity to serve the world around us. When the pandemic hit, we were able to go online and maximize our media output and share the gospel with hundreds of new families. We were able to work towards alleviating food poverty with the Love Your Neighbour campaign. A miracle legacy gift came in incredibly from a lady called Grace Jacobs, a pillar of our church and the community, who dedicated decades of her life to translating the Bible into Ghanaian dialects. We've been able to start the restoration of the Bible College and create a hub for the next generation of leaders and missionaries. This year will be our first year where we partner with Moorlands Bible College. Incredible. We've been able to create a working space for toddlers and children in the house so they can thrive each week. We've been able to sponsor Pastor Didier in France on his first full-time year of ministry, releasing him to manage the new build of a church centre in Les Ulis near Paris. We've been able to be amongst the first responders to get aid to Afghanistan and the war in Ukraine. We are able because God enables us. Gandhi said, "A rising tide doesn't raise people who don't have a boat. We have to build the boat for them. We have to give them the basic infrastructure to rise with the tide."
Hi everyone, hi church. I've wanted to get you in the New Life Foundation food bank for a long time, so we thought that Above and Beyond would be the perfect opportunity. I really believe that for New Life Foundation, this is our Esther moment. I'm always really reluctant to talk about Esther because that's my name, if you didn't know, but I believe that we together have come to this position as a foundation for such a time as this. You know, the headlines state that we are in the middle or the beginnings of a cost of living crisis, but we believe that above that headline is a greater headline, that Jesus is the hope of the world and that Christ is in us, and we are here positioned for such a time as this. Over the past 2.5 years, God has been preparing us as a foundation, just like Esther in the Bible went through her season, her 1 year of preparation before her moment before the king. God's been preparing us, and we've been working together as a team. God's been adding volunteers. We've been building relationships with local schools, healthcare professionals, the social workers, the Citizens Advice Bureau, the Housing Association. We've been linked up with local churches who've been bringing us donations. Aldi and Lidl, amazing supermarkets, have got behind our campaign. And God has positioned us, and we are ready to go. We are ready to be the hands and feet of Jesus at this time. And because behind every crisis is an opportunity to shine the light of Jesus. And over the past year, because of your giving and because of the doors that God has miraculously opened, we've supported an average of 60 families a week, every week of the year. That's 200 people, 200 souls every single week. We've sent out over 9,000 meals already this year, plus all the supplies that go with it, like tea, coffee, cereals, pasta. We sent out 1,000 care packages through the local schools to kids affected by trauma, mental health, the repercussions of COVID, domestic abuse, young carers. And the truth is, because of your spirit of generosity, church, your spirit above and beyond, when the Ukraine war kicked in earlier in the year, which left us all shocked and heartbroken watching the news, we were able to respond as a church immediately. We sent over money through World Vision, but also we were able to partner with vans across borders and sent essential supplies right into the heart of Ukraine where they needed the supplies. And during the year, we have brought £22,600 worth of food for some of the most disadvantaged people in this community. And we've done so much more. I could talk all day, you know what I'm like, about what God has done through this foundation. And the numbers are not important, but what is important, that behind every single number is a soul. It represents a household, a life that God cares so deeply about. And our aim has always been and will always be to help those that cannot help themselves, to lift up one life, one household towards the love of Jesus, towards his hope, and to always leave people feeling better, more full of hope than when we first started supporting them. So, the truth is we need a new home. This place, if you were with me in here, it stinks so bad. Chris, our cameraman, can barely breathe right now. And when it rains outside, it rains inside. Our building is below the water table line. So when it floods in here too. But really, we need a house for people. This ministry, the church, is all about people because God loves people. We need a home where people are going to come to our community hub and feel a safe place, feel encouraged, feel loved. They can get debt advice, where they can have counselling, where they can come and do alpha courses, where they can feel they can just come and belong. That's what we believe the local church is all about. So here's a scripture to finish. Matthew 5 says, "Keep open house. Be generous with your lives. By opening up to others, you'll prompt people to open up with God, this generous Father in heaven." God bless you. This is our time.
As our family grows, we naturally look to build new homes and new extensions. The challenge we have in front of us right now is in 2025, we will lose half of our building as our foyer only has temporary permission to stay in situ. We've been in a race against time, a pandemic, the rising cost of living, to consolidate this whole church site and prepare the way for a new build at a cost-effective price. Sam Knight and the team have been working with architects and national heritage and traffic consultants and environment teams to bring about this dream. Finally, this week, we're believing plans for our new build will go in. So please get praying. But remember, the church is not a building. The church is the people called out by the Spirit of God to reach the world for Christ. And incredibly, despite the recent turbulent years, Jesus kept adding families to the church. So we are believing that very soon we'll have a new facility fit for that purpose, to house the whole vision for the church and beyond.
Hey church, welcome to youth. This happens from 7 to 9 every week on a Friday. Every week on a Friday, and we have about 80 to 100 young people that come from the local area, some like from church, and about 50% at one point came from the local area. One of the main things that we do each year is our summer camp. It takes place about over there. We get them together, have church services, but we just have loads and loads and loads of fun as well. One of the things that the church does is actually gift for some of the young people who can't afford to come to be there, people that wouldn't usually be able to be there. So Bishop Luffer, who we have a good relationship with, they contacted me this year and said, what can we do? We have a group of Ukrainians that come along to Bishop Luffer and just joined. What can we do? Is there anything we can do for them? And we said, yeah, they can come for free. So an amazing group of people in our church gave money, and we managed to get them on. And in the end, we had about 6 Ukrainians, and there wasn't a dry eye in the house when they all stood on the stage, and we stood and prayed for them, gave them gifts, and just really loved on them. I remember it was the last day when we were packing up, and Mary's mum, Mary was the translator for the event, and still just a 16-year-old girl, her mum came up to me and she said, why have you guys done this? Why? And I said, we love because Jesus first loved us. We've got no agenda, we're just Christians. And it's people like that, Christians, people like you, who invested in this next generation and are making events like this that happen every week here possible. So thank you for what you're doing, church. And you know what, next summer camp, we'd love to do something similar. We'd love to take on even that group of Ukrainians again, or another group that need it. But that's our area of faith stretch, and we'd love you to join in with us.
I don't know about you, but man, when the tide's out, I get impatient. A lot of people I know even get passive aggressive. But I want to keep encouraging you to embrace the wait. Isaiah 40 says, those that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not grow faint. Waiting on God holds within it an incredible promise. The Lord increases strength. It's about focusing our frustrations. Waiting gives us time to prepare, research, to make room, to dream into the future. It's kind of like expecting a newborn baby. You start to dream its future into being. You paint the nursery. You start to build furniture, back to front in my case. You study health foods like kelp and broccoli, and then start to gradually convince yourself that they will taste better than chocolate. Catching the tide is a fine science. If you wait too long and don't pull out to sea, when the tide's in, you'll miss your opportunity. But it's also true that if you strike out too early, you will run aground and end up in the mud banks. Waiting births in us the character traits of perseverance and faith as we focus in on the voice of God for direction in our lives. Is there something you're waiting for? Let me encourage you to stay the course. Speak God's word into your future. Stay fit. Surround yourself with veteran sailors who understands the tidal shift of your long faith journey. Don't isolate yourself or jump ship or walk the plank and drown in self-pity. Embrace the wait. There is this famous phrase taken from William Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. And it says this: there is a tide in the affairs of men, which taken at the flood leads on to fortune. Omitted, all of the voyage of their life is bound in shallows and miseries. On such a full sea are we now afloat, and yet we must take the current where it serves or lose our ventures. He's referring to the day in which great sailing ships had to wait outside of port for the appropriate time to catch the tides. This became their window of opportunity. Shakespeare reminds us that the key to a flourishing life is knowing where the momentum of the day is leading us. But it's also up to us as men and women of the hour of faith to recognize and seize the opportunity. Jesus said, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? Now that's a sobering question. Are we ready to carpe diem? Are we ready to seize the day? Have you noticed that when the tide comes in, they fill the whole basin and everything in the harbour rises together? The large boats, the smaller boats, the average boats, the broken boats, the tidal momentum lifts everything up together. As Jesus' spirit of generosity increases in us, it lifts us all up together. As we come to give into the church's future, we're doing it as one church, one body. Some will give from their overflow, others will give a legacy gift, others will give out of their small saving. But it's not about the size of your gift, but the direction of our hearts. Something powerful happens when we unite with one another in our giving. Our capacity together increases. When we humble ourselves and learn from one another, our collective giving increases and our own capacity. We can go much further together than we ever could on our own. It's like being in a football team surrounded with great players. We draw momentum off one another. We draw momentum off the team. Where people unite, where we humble ourselves, where we sacrifice together, God commands a blessing in that moment. Right now, the greatest testimony to a divided world is a united church. The greatest testimony to the world in retreat is to move out with a generous spirit. Tides in the end are about providing a healthy abundance for all oceanic life, including the reproductive activities of fish and ocean plants. Floating plants and animals ride the tidal currents between the breeding areas and deeper waters. The tides help remove pollutants, circulate nutrients and ocean plants that animals need to survive. God tells the ancient prophet Jeremiah in a time of duress to work towards the peace and prosperity of the city. And that means believing for peace and prosperity for the world in times of duress, recession, and in times also of flourishing. Maybe you've been stuck in the mud. Get ready, the Spirit of Jesus is about to turn the tide. Have you become cynical and frustrated as the tides have been out? Have you resorted to throwing mud pies or burying your head in the sand? It's time to open your eyes. The tide is rising. Christ is coming.
Hear the shouts, hear the triumph songs in the camp of the saved. The hand of God has turned the tide. The hand of God is raised in victory. The hand of God has turned the tide.